Here's a guy who thinks you need free will in order to use reason.
To argue against free will, which involves arguing against reason in my view,
Your view is wrong. Reasoning is not a spontaneous occurrence.
is to reaffirm the fact that you have free will. In order for Alex to make arguments here, he has to activate his mind. He's got to say, Craig made this point. How am I going to get them to not do this? And in order to ask those kinds of questions, he has to bring forth his full awareness of the situation.
Which actually presupposes determinism. If the choice to bring about your full awareness is free, in other words, it happens for no reason, then nobody makes that choice. Rather, it just happens on its own. If your view is that there is an agent that makes that choice, then either the agent was caused to make that choice, in which case determinism is still true, or the agent made that choice for no reason, in which case the agent doesn't even have control over himself.
He's not choosing content with the free will. That's, as I said, that's not the choice. But he has to choose to activate his mind. If he doesn't, then he can't do this thing, and he would default strictly to his emotions or his desires, but he's not doing that.
How do you know? How do you know the choice to activate his mind wasn't a consequence of an emotional motivation to do so?
Which means that he's really contradicting himself in the argument that he's making, because he's using free will to deny the existence of free will. I know this is not intentional, but that's what's going on. So this is what Aristotle referred to as reaffirmation through denial, and it's a very it's a very revealing thing. It also commits what Ayn Rand called the fallacy of concept stealing, because he's using all of these concepts, reason and logic and emotion, literally every concept he's using, and these concepts could not exist if we couldn't choose to group things together and come up with categories and make definitions and use them. This is what the human rational faculty enables us to do. This is what makes us the freaks of nature, in effect, in this beautiful way, is that we can do this. But the whole thing happens by activating your mind.
And why does that have to happen spontaneously? Why can't it have a cause? If you think the cause is the agent, why can't something be causing the agent to cause the mind activation?
Reason does not operate automatically. You can turn it off entirely. You can drift and not use it fully, or you can choose full awareness. We know that we can do this because we can see it introspectively, just as you can see me walk across the stage, and just as a student can see the pop quiz arrive on his desk.
What I can see introspectively is that whenever I choose to activate my mind, that choice is always a consequence of a motivation to do so. It is not a spontaneous occurrence that just happens for no reason.
One last thing, I want to give your last question. What causes the choice? Alex, he wants a cause apart from the choosing agent to cause the choice.
No, the choosing agent can be the cause, but when the choosing agent acts to cause the choice, that act either has a cause of its own, in which case it is not ultimately a free act, or it happens for no reason, in which case the agent is not really in control of his own actions.
And this is understandable because we've all been taught the false theory of causation, which is what is called event causation. It's that everything that happens is caused by a prior event.
No, that's not necessarily true. There do seem to be spontaneous events, but everything that happens either has a cause or it doesn't. There's no middle ground here. If something is caused by an agent, then either the agent's act of causation itself has a cause, or it happens for no reason.
But that's just not true. Everything that happens is caused by entities. Actions are actions of entities. Entities act in accordance with their identity. If I throw a rock at a window, the rock has a certain effect because of the nature of the entities and their interaction. If I throw a cotton ball at a window, a different thing happens. Why? The event is the same, something hitting the window. The entities are different. Actions are actions of entities. Entities act in accordance with their identity. That's the law of causality. Not everything that happens was caused by a prior event. Human beings are such that we have a rational faculty, the capacity to form concepts, use logic, etc. That capacity, one of its natures is that it operates by choice. There's nothing random or weird about human beings having a capacity that other things don't have.
The capacity is not what seems to be random. The agent's act of causing choices is what you seem to be claiming is causeless and therefore random.
Plants have capacities that rocks don't have. We don't look at rocks and say, well, that's the only way things can be. And you see a plant and you go, it's impossible. We can't have that. And you shouldn't look at human beings and say, well, these things are weird. They not only can locomote like other animals, but they can also move their minds by choice. No, we can't have that. Other animals can't do it.
How do you know that other animals can't do it?
We are sui generis. We're unique. We're the one thing that we know of so far that has this weird capacity to choose to think or not to think. We know it because it's introspectively true. And so,
Again, what's introspectively true is that when I choose to think, it is always a determined consequence of an emotional motivation.
the choice is caused by us. We are the entity that makes the choice. We are the entity that acts in that way. So it's not causeless.
But why do we act in that way? Does something cause the agent to act, or does the agent act for no reason?
But it is not necessitated by outside forces or by prior events.
So it happens for no reason? If, when we act to cause a choice, there are no outside forces or prior events causing that act, then we are acting for no reason. If we act for no prior reason, if our actions are simply spontaneous, how can we really have control over them?
You've got to unpack that package deal of determinism, throwing all of those things together. They don't all belong together. And if you put them all together, you will get confused about what's actually happening. And you'll feel like you can't make a choice, which is just like feeling like you can't walk across the stage.
It's actually only if determinism is true that I feel like I can make a choice. If, when I act to make a choice, that act is spontaneous and not the result of any prior motivations or causes, then my choices would simply be unpredictable spontaneous occurrences. How could I have control over such actions?
Obviously, there's a lot there. And in fact, it might be helpful to drill down into one or two things here, because otherwise we're responding to three things at once. But maybe I'll do all three and we'll see which one you feel like taking. You might have all just heard me, ladies and gentlemen, if you were paying attention, describe the process of reason as something which is outside of our control. That is to say, reason is something which compels you and not the other way around. Be it deductive or inductive reasoning, be you reasoning correctly or incorrectly, the fact of the matter is you don't get to decide whether you are compelled by reason. If I make an argument and it convinces you, then it just convinces you. You can't say, you know what, that's really convincing, I'm sold, but I'm just going to choose not to believe it anyway.
If I infer that a conclusion follows by logical necessity from a set of premises that I believe to be true, then I won't be able to abstain from believing that said conclusion is true because I won't even be able to understand what it would mean for it to not be true.
If you're convinced, you're convinced. Craig just made an argument which said, well, Alex says that there are only actions that you want to do or that you're forced to do. And since reason is something that you're not forced to do, it must be something you want to do and therefore all emotive. And so there, I'm not making a reasonable argument, I'm just emoting. I just said that reasoning is something which compels you. The reasoning process is something which makes you think a particular way, which makes you compelled to believe a particular conclusion, which means that reason does not fall into the want category of action.
Whether I believe that a conclusion is true that follows by logical necessity is certainly not motivated by emotion, but whether I endeavor to judge whether a conclusion deductively follows or not, or I instead choose not to think about it, is, in fact, something that is emotionally motivated.
As you either do something because you want to or because you're forced to, reason falls into the latter category. When you reason something, it's because you have to, because that's what reason is. Reason is something which guarantees a conclusion from premises, psychologically speaking. I think that's important to note. So I don't think that I'm just well, it's complicated, but on this particular dichotomy, right? You either want to or because you're forced to. Well, pay attention to the next time you're convinced of an argument and think which of those it more naturally falls into. Did you want to be convinced by a conclusion? Or did you just get convinced outside of your control?
I can't just believe that 2 plus 2 is 5, no matter how much I might want it to be true.
So I think that's important to note there. I don't think that free will requires reason. I think that reason provides almost a counterexample to free will, and I certainly don't think that this argument entails that reason is just emoting, although it might well be emoting, not for this reason.
Whether you choose to apply reason is emotive, but what conclusions you draw are not the result of emotion.
Another important thing to say is that Craig said, you want to go to a rave, but you also have some business that you want to work on. And the desire for the rave is stronger. Remember that Craig makes a perfectly reasonable observation that introspection is trustworthy. Desire is something which you can only know through introspection. If you think you desire something more, that is just to desire it more. It's like if you think one thing is more painful than another thing. If I put my hand on a stove and then another stove and I say, I think this one's more painful, that just means it is more painful to me. I can't think that this one's more painful, but actually this one's more painful. Maybe like in the long run or something, but I mean in that moment. Pain is just a subjectively defined experience, and so is desire. So Craig said, okay, well, I desire to go to the rave more. I've got this business thing, but the desire to go to the rave is stronger. But then through some mysterious faculty that apparently just kind of happens somehow, I choose to activate this thing called reason.
If that choice just happens without cause or motivation, then it doesn't make any sense to say that you make that choice. Rather, it just happens on its own.
And then I become convinced, somehow also freely, that, my values are really important. And suddenly my desire for staying at home is stronger than my desire to go to the rave. Well, yeah, that's in so many words what I'm saying happens. Your desire to go to the rave is stronger. And then you think about it for a moment and something occurs to you and you think, well, actually, if I should think about this for a moment. And again, this just occurs to you. This just happens. You think, but if I stay at home and I work on my business, then I'm going to have a successful business and that's the life that I really want. And suddenly that desire that you've just realized just overwhelms the desire to go to the rave. And so you stay at home and do the business.
The only time I've ever been able to resist doing what I'm motivated to do is if I have a competing motivation that's stronger. Where's the freedom in that?
Then imagine, you get a phone call and somebody says, hey, by the way, that business partner that you really want to work with, he's going to be at the rave and he's going to be in a good mood and you might be able to have a chat with him. You might think to yourself, okay, I'm going to use my reasoning here, reason my way into what I should do. That's not what happens. You just think to yourself, gosh, well, my desire for this is stronger, but now considering this factor, my desire for that's stronger, but now considering this factor, my desire for that is stronger. And your desires are just governing your wants. The important thing, your desires are just governing what you end up doing. The important thing is, do you choose what occurs to you?
As Arthur Schopenhauer said, you can do what you want, but you can't want what you want.
Do you choose to activate reason, as Craig puts it? Well, maybe you do. I don't deny that people make choices. I just think that they're not in control of those choices. I don't think you get to make that decision. Like, you're all paying attention right now, and I could tell you to choose to stop paying attention. And maybe you'd be able to do it. But only because you want to. And why do you want to? Well, to prove a point, because I just asked you to prove that you can do it. Okay, well, now I want to do it. So, okay, I'm going to ignore you and look over here. There is a determinate factor that causes you to do that or to not. I think that is of crucial importance. What is the last thing you said? What was the third note made?
You're asking a guy who can't remember any of the things he said. So I'm not sure what.
Oh, the agent causation. It was agent causation.
Agent causation.
And then an agent causation. Okay, so yeah, I understand there are these competing visions of what causes something, and some people like to suppose that events can just be caused by agents. This process is entirely mysterious to me. When someone says, "Oh, okay, well, you chose to lift up that glass," I say, "Well, what caused me to lift up the glass?" And it's almost like that's just an illegitimate question, because the answer isn't nothing. The answer isn't, no, there was no cause, because that's random. The answer is that that's just sort of somehow an incoherent question.
Folks who argue for free will want to have their cake and eat it too. They insist that nothing causes them to make their choices, but also that they don't just make choices for no reason. Which is it? Those are contradictory assertions. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.